This week, we present a technical segment, actually from myself, on lightweight vulnerability management using NMAP. In our second segment, we welcome back Corey Thune, co-founder of Gravwell, for our second technical segment titled PCAPs or It Didn't Happen, diving into collecting packet captures on demand with threat hunting with a use case with Gravwell. In the security news, Octopus Scanner sinks its tentacles into GitHub repositories. Robinhood and the Merry Men. Zoom restricts end-to-end encryption to paid users. Hacker steals secrets from U.S. nuclear missile contractor. And had a bad weekend, probably if you're a Sectico customer. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. Are you an enterprise dissatisfied with overpriced analytics software that can't keep up with modern data? If so, then Gravwell is the solution for you. Gravwell is an unstructured data analytics platform for enterprises who demand total data visibility across their network. Gravwell lets your security team go beyond the SIM and fuse data sources to correlate and answer questions you didn't know needed to be asked. Go to gravwell.io/Security Weekly for an unlimited data trial and gain uncompromising visibility today. PlexTrack is the platform that guides the healthy collaboration of red and blue teams to get the daily security work done. Red teams can create reports in half the time and track risk to resolution with the blue team. Blue teams can centralize remediation efforts across all scans, assessments, and audits through simple visualizations of risk, scanner, and ticketing integrations. Enhanced analytics allow you to effectively communicate risk in real time. PlexTrack is perfect for remote collaboration across all teams. Visit securityweekly.com/PlexTrack to claim your free month today.
I want you to come down to Crazy Johnny's Discount All You Can Eat. Security OPSEC discounts every day. And if you come down today, we're going to give you 50% off a Cisco ASA firewall that was only used once by a little old lady to defend her church on Sunday afternoons. And we'll throw in one free Paul Asadorian.
Welcome, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. It's episode 654, being recorded on June 4th, 2020, right here in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, apparently where we're having some kind of a sale. And, of course, the one, the only Dr. Doug White.
Hello.
Is in studio.
I am. I'm here. I'm 6 feet away, but I'm here.
And you are wearing your DEF CON is canceled.
I am. This is my DEF CON redacted shirt. So I got one. I got two. So
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Where'd you get those? On the internet.
They were selling them, yeah. I mean, where all things come from, the internet. You just get down on your knees and pray, and then things fall out of the sky.
And hopefully it shows up.
A little Amazon drone comes over and it drops it.
Drops it down.
Yeah. Shortest swag line ever.
That's right.
Well, you got that right. That was the easiest DEF CON shirt I ever acquired. So,
Mr. Larry Pesce is in the house. Welcome, Larry.
Indeed, doing a little bit more than the 6 foot social distancing.
Yes.
Distancing.
Larry is at home with kids running around, apparently, making noises in the background. Mr. Lee Neely is here with us as well. Lee, welcome.
Happy to be here. I'm way more than social distancing 6 feet from you. But don't worry about Doug's offer. There's more. And if you call within the next 5 minutes, you get an extra free download.
We might even be auctioning off an original Stuxnet poster that someone got from originally working on Stuxnet as a parting gift from either Israel or maybe the NSA. Mr. Tyler Robinson is here with us. All that is just speculation. He's muted, too.
He's muted.
Yeah, hopefully the train going by doesn't come through today.
Yes. Wow, so many places we could go with that. In any case, I put my keyboard down and I shouldn't have because I have to read announcements because we need to talk about learning how hidden vulnerabilities lead to application compromise in our next webcast with Sneak. That's right. Simon's awesome, by the way. He's going to be giving, Matt and I will be presenting a few slides in the beginning. Simon's going to take us through exploiting a web application, showing how the transient vulnerabilities and libraries present themselves. And show us how to attack some Docker vulnerabilities, and then show us how we can keep tabs on that using, first and foremost, Sneak's freemium model of software to keep tabs on that. So I'm super excited about this webcast. Also, our second webcast will be with Google Cloud, teaching you how to prevent account takeover attacks. You can register for all of our webcasts or virtual trainings by visiting securityweekly.com/webcasts or going to /on-demand and watch the previously recorded ones. Fun stuff, a whole bunch of stuff happening at Google Cloud. Tune into the webcast because there's too much to explain it all here, and I'd rather have it come from Google. But if you're wondering like about CAPTCHAs or what happened to Chronicle, tune into the webcast. We're going to clear all the air on that kind of stuff. So now we're going to talk about lightweight vulnerability management with NMAP. I'm not sure what prompted me. I saw this FlanScan project come about by Cloudflare, and I was like, I kind of want to use NMAP to do two things was my goal anyhow. I wanted to take an inventory of the network, and I wanted to use it as a vulnerability scanner. And so I kind of went searching for projects that are using NMAP. And I had flagged FlanScan a long time ago, and I used it. I was like, wow, that's really like straightforward. Like I need some more for this segment. So I modified someone else's script to do some other stuff, the Python script, which is cool. So I'll show you all of that. But now when I went searching for NMAP projects, I found quite a few. I was like, because what is on GitHub that might have done something with NMAP? Turns out 2,990 repositories exist using the keyword NMAP. Now that doesn't mean that they're all, solely focused on NMAP. Right. It was just a keyword search. I sorted them by the ones with the most stars. Obviously, the main NMAP GitHub repository is there. There's a project called htrace, which I did not look into, and then some ones I did recognize. Of course, Infobytes Faraday, Vulners, NMAP Vulners. There was another one in there, Lee Baird, that looks familiar. I think we know him. Has a Discover script to automate pen testing tasks. There was Secubus and Dreidis framework were up there as well. So some projects we know and love. Tracker Jacker was really cool, actually. It was a Python project for nmapping Wi-Fi networks that you haven't joined. So have you used this one before?
I have run Tracker Jacker. Yeah, it's a very cool tool, and it will give you a list of all that stuff. So that's been collected on your network.
Now, many of these projects are very outdated, haven't been updated in a long time.
NMAP's really old.
I tend to stay away from projects that are, haven't been updated in a long time.
Yeah, but
there can be some gems in there.
I mean, NMAP's doing something that's been going on forever. Yeah. And it hasn't. I mean, it has not really at its basic level, not really changed. I mean, the basic task, it's still a combustion engine, and at its heart. So it's still Satan at its heart.
Yeah, well, sort of, yes.
Well, Satan was what it was based on. So
yes. So I didn't test all of these projects in him. I kind of just went poking around to find the ones that I was interested in. But the one that I had heard about is called FlanScan. It is from Cloudflare. They did do a fantastic job with it. Look. I mean, if their goal was to create a really easy way for people to do vulnerability scanning with NMAP, mission accomplished. I mean, it's basically you're up and running in 3 commands, like legit. You do make build, and then you can do make start or make HTML. So really just 2 commands, because make HTML will actually initiate the scan and convert the latex reports, which it generates by default, which is kind of interesting, into HTML. So it uses a combination of VulnHub, which is the NSE scripts for NMAP that identify vulnerabilities. It uses NMAP, of course, as the engine, and then uses some Python scripts to work with the results. It also has some cool options to, if you were to run this on a regular routine basis, you can save these reports to Google S3, Amazon S3, Google Cloud, and one other place, which was kind of cool too. So they have integrations to save it to a central place. Because vulnerability management's all about what do you do once you find the vulnerabilities. So now, if you're looking to take on this project sort of like I was and wanted to customize it, for most, it's probably not very easy to customize. Super easy to run. It's goal in life. like testing it this week, it cranks out vulnerability reports for your targets, right? But if you want to customize it, you can add, and it's in the documentation, add NMAP flags, but those are additions to the core NMAP command that it runs. So you can't tell it like, oh, by the way, like don't do port scanning, just do a discovery scan. I did make it do that, but I'll show you the ugly hack that I did, and then I found another project that I liked better for accomplishing that goal. But as a vulnerability scanner, I really like FlanScan, largely because also, I mean, they put it in a Docker container. So now I can shoot this wherever I need it to be, inside of other networks or whatever, and initiate a scan, which is pretty cool.
So you can't change it because it's all compiled into the Docker? Is that
No. You can change it, but it's coded in such a way to run this very specific command. So changing it is kind of, well, I'll show you what I did to change it.
Well,
it's
you're going to do it.
But I don't believe they intended it to be something that was really extensible, right?
Yeah.
They intended it to be a Docker container that's got some NMAP and some scripts to produce a vulnerability report. If that was their goal, they succeeded, and I applaud them.
Then you charge suckers $50,000 for running it.
True. Now, I added this graphic, which is hilarious. I know the text is really small, but it's all the different programming languages, right? And under Latex, it says, your paper makes no goddamn sense, but it's the most beautiful thing I've ever laid eyes on.
Wait. I thought it was LaTeX.
I call it Latex.
I call it Latex. So it's probably wrong.
It's probably wrong. If Doug says it that way.
Yeah, if I say it that way, it's probably wrong.
And Doug was saying that first, and I learned it from Doug, so I'm just blaming it all on Doug.
So,
okay, perfect. I blame Mike Bohr.
Yeah, we could always go that route.
LaTeX. Or you could call it LaTeX.
I called it I don't know. If anyone wants to weigh in on...
Yeah, somebody should jump in there and tell us.
Because I'm probably still going to call it Latex, but...
Now I need to pull up. I'm going to pull up the Discord. Somebody will probably come.
HTML is pretty funny. When you hand them the HTML, they say, this is a flower pot, which I thought was really funny. In any case, the configuration for FlanScan is very easy. You create a file called ips.txt, and you load in it your targets. It reads that file and then produces a bunch of reports, which one of the formats happens to be Latex or LaTeX, however you want to say it. It then also converts it to HTML and gives you access to the raw XML files, which is kind of neat. So you basically map this, you mount a volume from your local file system into the container. It writes the reports there. Again, there are scripts that you can send it to other S3 buckets and such things like that. Now, you do get a pretty fancy report, actually. I spent a lot of my time in my InfoSec career looking at vulnerability reports in various capacities, including working for Tenable Network Security. And I was like, this is pretty cool. Does the standard, yellow kind of green, red thing. The graphic here says my website doesn't always fail, but when it does, it's because of an Apache Tomcat error. I would say my vulnerability scan, it doesn't always fail compliance, but when it does, it's because of Apache Tomcat. And what you're looking at in my vulnerability scan of my network is an Apache Tomcat. Now, Tyler, you should be very intimately familiar with the first high-level finding of 7.5, as it is a vulnerability and associated exploit that you and I have worked on tangentially in the past.
I was sitting there looking at it like, I remember that night.
Yep. It was a long night.
It was.
So it's interesting because I was like, I could have sworn I spun down that Tomcat container from when Tyler and I were working on the vulnerability. It turns out I did. And then, I've obscured the IP address here, but there was a service running on my network.
Started it.
It's something that you might dip chips in. Anyone that runs Tomcat? That would be Guacamole, Apache Guacamole, which, by the way, I really want to do an upcoming tech segment on that because Guacamole's awesome. Both the stuff you dip chips in, but also the Apache Guacamole, which is basically a proxy for your RDP, VNC, SSH, and or Telnet connections, and it gives you that inside of a browser. If you've used Pentest Labs, Attack and Defense, John Strand's CTF Lab, and a lot of others use Guacamole to do that. I was super impressed. My thing with Guacamole, as is evidenced by this vulnerability scan from FlanScan, is trying to secure it, because it will give you remote access into all of the systems. There's still credentials in there, but yeah, there's credentials you have to add in. It depends on what the service is, right? If it's VNC for Windows, you still have to log into the Windows screen, and that depends on configuration too, I'm sure. But anyway, it's a sensitive service. And locking it, I'm like, I want two-factor. I want all these things on it. And I'm going to start digging into that next. I will say for our production here, though, using Guacamole rather than like walls of monitors was awesome.
Yeah.
So I'm digging it. Now, it includes a Makefile. Those kind of unfamiliar with compiling C and C++ programs may recognize the Makefile. And so when you type make, it executes things inside the Makefile. My meme for this one says, "I see you didn't read the Makefile before doing make. I too like to live dangerously." But those of us that have ever edited a Makefile probably don't want to edit one ever again. Right?
Yeah, but you probably should.
And you probably should. Yeah.
It's.
In any case, the Makefile basically has blocks, and that's the commands it executes according to the parameter that you pass to the make command. And what I did was I tried to make Flan. So by default, you can say make HTML. It will run the Docker container, map your drive, and format a report with HTML and create a container called FlanScan. So I added one called start_discover, and I passed it an additional parameter called discover. And this was just my little hack to try to, hey, guess what? We've got an interview coming up. So you pass it a parameter which passes it into the entry point run.sh script inside the Docker container. And so this was just my kind of hack to be like, how would I make it run a completely new NMAP command? Because if you do make start, you'll see in the script, and you pass it additional flags, it will append those to your NMAP command. But I wanted an entirely new NMAP command, so this was one of my hacks. So if you do, in my version, which, if you can probably just copy it from here if you wanted it, but in my version, when it runs the scan, so it actually is a shell script that kicks off the scan inside of the container. The original code just had nmap dash lowercase s capital V dash lowercase o capital X, which tells it do a service discovery scan, output XML, output normal results to standard out is dash lowercase n space dash, do verbosity to 1 dash V1, and then $ampersand, which are the parameters that are being passed into the script. So that's where you could, when you run your make start command, append different ones, different additional flags for NMAP. Now, it does also run -- script vulners.nse, of course, right? And there's some other cool stuff in the script. It reads the file where you put your IP addresses to target, right? Because it $line is the inside the loop where it's looping through all of the lines inside of that ips.txt file. It creates the current time and date, so it can date timestamp the file as well. Which is pretty cool. So what I did was I said, well, if someone passed in the parameter called discover, then run this nmap command, otherwise run this other one. And my nmap command was very simple. It was a simple discovery scan. So basically most of the same options, except I did lowercase sn, which just turns on only the discovery portion, turns off all port scanning. So that was kind of interesting, and I was like, that doesn't, I don't know, it's a real hack. It's one way to modify this for your needs if you want to use it as an example. At least it gives you some insights into the kind of under the covers how FlanScan is working if you do want to customize it. So then I was like, okay, but what do I really want to accomplish, and what does everyone other than Latex use to read documents? And that's Excel, of course, is very, very popular, right? And Excel spreadsheets are magical, of course. And so what I decided I really wanted to do was do an inventory scan and be able to send that somewhere, right? And Excel seemed like a logical kind of thing to do. And I know I could generate the XML from NMAP pretty easily. I actually looked into some command line kung fu to take the... So if you do lowercase o, capital X, and then a dash, NMAP will output to standard out the XML results.
Right.
And so then I was trying to pipe that to things like XSLT proc and XML lint, and then I was looking at awk scripts to parse not the XML output. There was awk scripts online to parse the regular normal output to basically get the IP address and the MAC address on the same line.
Okay. Yeah.
Is what some of those scripts were doing, and those were just like really ugly. And I'm like, I really just don't want to like support this because I know like a week from now I'm gonna look at it and go, how does that work again?
Awk.
Right?
It's awk. It's always gonna be ugly.
Exactly.
It's supposed to be, but it's useful.
It's useful. It's powerful, and I sort of got it working. And then I was like, all right, what? I'm like, if I'm gonna code in something, I need Python to be more comfortable. And I found this awesome person whose handle is Laconic Wolf, and he's got this little project out there called NMAP Scan to CSV. And actually, his Python code was really good. If you go check out the code, it's really easy to read, and it was easy to modify, and it was very straightforward and well written. There was actually try blocks with accepts in it, like in most of his code. So I was really impressed because most of the stuff you pull down from Git, it's like no one knows how to use try or accept. I mean, if they do try and, which is ironic, if they try and use a try accept block, they're using it completely wrong. Yeah. If they're trying at all.
It also apparently appears to work in Python 3.
And it was Python 3, Larry, yes, which was awesome as well.
Crap.
Right? So props to whoever Laconic Wolf is. Shout out on the show. I will be sending a pull request and or forking and whatever we decide to do with it. But certainly, you can actually see some of my modifications here.
Can I ask a dumb question?
Yes, go ahead, Lee.
I thought you were supposed to be able to import an XML file into Excel, or is that Pipedream?
Not to my knowledge. I know that you can translate it into HTML using XSLT proc. And I think there's another utility to do that.
Okay.
So there is an XML, because that's via it's not a style sheet. It's an X. What is it? A
map or something.
There's a mapping.
There's a mapping, and it will open an XML file. So you'll see people just pull them in there, and if it's a really simple XML file, it does kind of do that, and then you can data sort it and try to guess where the columns is or define them. And if there are already delimiters in there, which there may or may not be, you can actually delimit it into columns. But
I'm wondering how it handles the attributes of a tag, right? Because that's what you have to. So at the top, Lee, to your point, you'll see a sample of an XML output from NMAP, right? And so you've got a host opening tag, and then you've got address tags for the addresses of the host. And one of the address, so there's two different types that are defined by attribute, right? So address is the tag. ADDR is an attribute. In this case, it's the IP address. And the adder type is another attribute, which tells me it's IPv4. And what I wanted to do was in the NMAP to CSV project, they didn't include the MAC address or the vendor. Probably because the person writing the script was scanning scanning it via the internet, right, where you're not going to get MAC address. I wanted it because I want to be on the same subnet, and I want to figure out what's on my network because there's not a lot of people here in studio. So in terms of employees, which means I can rip apart the network, and it's just John and I, and we can work around each other. So I've done massive amounts of infrastructure stuff. We built out an entire new studio in this time as well. And so I was like, I got to know what's on my network. So that's what fueled some of this project as well. And I'm like, if part of that, I want to know the MAC address and I want to know the vendor from the MAC address, right? And that helps John and I out just keeping tabs on making sure that everything on the network should be on the network. And if it doesn't belong there, let's remove it and take it out. If it does belong there, let's make sure we document it and know what it is. Now, on our network, that's really easy because there's I think I have 50 devices.
Right.
I think maybe 75 if you include the cigar lounge who we help out as well, right? So, I mean, we're not talking about tens and thousands of devices here. Arguably, you could extend this to, I mean, scaling it would require some, a lot more programming, but not out of the realm of possibility. NMAP is a great engine, right, for scanning. So, back to this. So, I've got the XML output here, and I modified the Python script to basically go find the MAC address if it existed. And I do that with the host.findAll attribute address, and I save that to a variable. And then I do that with the vendor name as well. And it turns out it was pretty easy to modify this particular Python script to get that stuff. I had to make some other modifications to then include those as columns in the CSV file, which, I mean, it wasn't even worth showing. There were such simple changes to the Python script. And so basically what this does is now when I give this XML results from NMAP, it converts it to a CSV and gives me my columns with MAC address and vendor, which helps me figure out what's on my network. Hopefully it can help others as well. So at first, I just did a basic inventory, right? So this is that NMAP command I was running before, which is dash lowercase s, lowercase n together, dash lowercase o, capital X, save the XML file, which just does a discovery scan, right? Which is all I cared about for now. So this is useful for sysadmins. You got to know at least what's connected to the network, right? Again, if you wanted to scale it, I would look at, and again, with almost 3,000 projects of NMAP out there, I gotta imagine you could find some code. Maybe someone has written something that to get the MAC address, rather if you're not on the subnet, go to the switches and traverse through your switches to maybe discover MAC addresses. I think would be kind of cool, right? Yeah. Then you can see it creates this little CSV file, right? Got my IP address, my MAC address, my vendor, and my host name. And so what I was doing this week, right, was that laborious task of making sure everything has a static IP address that needs one, making sure it has a host name, and making sure the forward and reverse lookups are. Because in building a new studio, I added probably a dozen different devices to the network all at once. And we were in the process of inventorying the production studio as well, which still requires physical systems with IP addresses. And we wanted to make sure that we accounted for every IP address, every MAC address, and that there was forward and reverse lookups, and that I didn't make a mistake, which actually in running this, I'm like, oh, oops, I forgot to, that doesn't have a reverse entry. I got to go add that kind of thing. So that's why I was using it. Lee, sorry, did you have comments, questions? Anyone?
No, actually, I was just noticing that in our Discord channel there was a question about what you could go to your switches to get the MAC address, and you answered it like 40 seconds after he typed it.
Yeah. So that's all the junk on our network. And so then if you do a more exhaustive scan, because I noticed inside of the source code of the NMAP convert XML to CSV that if you had an XML file that had operating system information, port information, services information, it would add that to the spreadsheet. So I did NMAP dash capital O, OS fingerprinting, lowercase s, capital V, service discovery, and outputted to XML scan the entire network. And lo and behold, the script worked. And it didn't crash anything. My changes didn't I was worried that my changes may have affected some other part of the script. So I did that. And it basically creates this nice, again, Excel is a super powerful tool.
Yeah.
This spits it all out into, CSV. You can import it into Excel. This is actually LibreOffice that I was using on my Linux machine. Imports it just fine. And, whether you're on a pen test or you've got a subnet that you need to do some discovery, reconnaissance, scanning, whatever it is, I'm like, this is actually pretty useful. Again, more for me just to kind of get a lay of the land. This is a little more laborious to go through, especially more hosts that you get on here, which is kind of interesting.
But Paul, you can actually now use this to use the power of Excel to generate yourselves some nice little charts.
Mm-hmm.
Like how many of these devices on your network, what percentage of them are Cisco, what percentage of them are Windows versus Linux, and so forth and so on. Which
percentage of them have open VNC or VNC running, which I had to do for Guacamole, which you need to find a better way to do authentication, right? I'm not so much worried about encryption. I mean, Guacamole doesn't support VNC over SSH yet, to my knowledge. I know it's a feature request that's hanging out there. So kind of interesting stuff. But, like you said, Larry, when that project comes up that I want to tackle some of the authentication problems we have, right? Because now, essentially we've pretty much doubled the number of production systems that we have with the new studio systems. I got to get a better handle on authentication. So having an inventory of what services are running and where I need to change all my passwords or implement a new authentication scheme or add two-factor authentication or wherever, this is a good starting point. So,
and for me, outside the scope of pen tests, we used to use stuff like this, and where we were using NMAP and we didn't have such a nice clean thing, was the first step in audit. Yep. When we walked in, one of the first things I always asked people for was, give me your network map. And they would, and
after the laughter subsides.
Yeah, well, after they either said, oh, yeah, I think we have that around here somewhere, and you noticed that the date on it was 1987, or that it was all running, it was all IPX, SPX or something,
right?
And you knew they were lying, because you knew they were lying. They always lied, but that was one of the steps we used immediately, was to collect that kind of gross cut of the network to say, well, then what the hell is this?
What is that?
Look at, you say you've got these 3 things, but look here, I got 50 things. What are these other 47 things?
You want to hear a funny story? I did that, what's that moment, and I'm like, I don't recognize that device. Like, what is that? I'm like, it doesn't have a DNS name. And again, with, roughly 50 hosts, I put everything in DNS. I'm like, it's got a static IP, and I know about it. And I'm like, I don't have an entry for that one. And I'm tracing cables. I'm looking at the MAC address tables on the switches, and I'm like, oh, that's just my laptop. I just forgot to update DNS. I was like, oh.
It's always the system admins that cause you problems.
That's right. Problem solved. But I did also realize in this discovery as well that my access point, which was running an old version of DDWort, was just not working. It was an SSID, and you could authenticate to it and maybe get to some things, but not other things. I don't know if it got powered on and off too many times, and some of the firmware got corrupt, or if someone hacked it, or if some buffer filled up. But even rebooting it didn't really seem to fix the problem. And some of my IoT devices were associating to that access point. And so what I did was, once I had run this inventory scan and I knew what was there, I was like, well, now I can go unplug that access point, because I'm pretty confident that all the important stuff I've accounted for, right? And so I'm like, unplug that access point. Now my thermostats are complaining, which were complaining before, so I put them on the regular wireless network for now. I'm going to create more wireless networks, but I put them on the regular wireless network, and magically everything started working. I'm like, this is wonderful. My Arlo camera is now working. Basically, I think what a lot of folks go through with their networks is it suffers from neglect, right? Because everything attached to your network and every project and every problem isn't always the most important thing, right? So you may have set stuff up a long time ago and just haven't gotten back to it for a while. And it kind of made me think neglect is bad. And one of the things I think to combat that I would like to extend this to is to start doing a diff. I want to say Secubus does some of that, but I couldn't find, if anyone knows of an NMAP one that does a diff of hey, I ran this scan today, and based on yesterday's scan, these are the things that are different.
Well, that's another great script to write, though. I mean, that's an easy enough script to write that differential report, because again, we used to do that a lot, because what you're talking about is very, very clear, and I remember describing it to some management people about it's like an animal running through the woods. It's just going through the woods, and there's all this stuff around, and things get burrs get caught on it, and all these sorts of things. And you really need to check that every now and then. Some stuff's harmless and other stuff is just laying around. But running a script like that once a week, we were recommending an audit they run depending on the company. We were saying like once a week to once a month. You ought to have this report, and this differential report should be clean because you're saying your network is static. So if your report is coming back unclean, somebody needs to say, what the hell is that, and go find the thing and do something about it. And maybe it's fine and you need to, and it's cool, but I really like that. I mean, that's been something I've been advocating since, way too long.
And I like the Docker thing too, because you could almost use it to spin it up on other systems, right? Or create some kind of distributed way to, I mean, you could do it with a Raspberry Pi. I mean, there's a lot of ways to skin that
Well, it's almost like a box you have to take around to different network segments, and you plug in the different network segments and spin it up for each one of them.
Right.
And because of Docker, you can do that really easily, and you can do that, literally plug in the wire and go, now I need to go to this one and that one, and you can do, there's a lot of different ways to do that. But I like being able to see that.
In larger networks, though, I think getting that telemetry from the switches and integrating that in is
that makes
useful.
me so nervous.
Yeah. Well, then you're talking about maybe SNMP to, pull that stuff back.
Yeah, and that makes me nervous.
That makes me nervous from a security perspective, too. Yeah.
The minute I hear SNMP and I see those guys getting all sweaty on the camera up there, I'm like, okay, they're going, yes, add SNMP.
Yes, SNMP's awesome.
Make it all public.
Simple network munging protocol.
That's right. So, again, we talked about some of the... with basic scripting, you can use this to get an inventory like we talked about and do the diffing, which I think would be a logical next step, and provide some basic vulnerability scanning. I mean, my kind of thing, I've worked in vulnerability management, obviously for Tenable for a long time, and very closely follow the industry today, and many of those fine companies are sponsors today. But for a lot of organizations, some basic vulnerability scanning with open source software is going to do a great job, right? And also, a couple of different scenarios. One, you might be a smaller business and can use this primarily and maybe only use larger, more expensive vulnerability management systems for some of your more critical stuff, some of your other areas, of the business. Also, in large businesses, in enterprises, they may have remote offices. Those remote offices are essentially like a small business, and maybe they're using this open source stuff and sending you the results. So
I would just want that differential. I would just say, give me a baseline, and once a week, send me. If I had a whole bunch of satellite units and they were reporting to me, I would just be wanting to say, like, once every whatever the time frame period is, send me that differential report, and it ought to have nothing new on it. And if it does, I want you to just write on there and say, this is a new server we added. And
the thing with scanning is, which is interesting, is I like the layer 2 discovery, right? Because I think if you've got a Rapid7 Qualys or Tenable, right, and it's running scans, it's probably not on every single network, right? But if I can get this on the network and do the ARP scan, it's a more accurate depiction of what's actually happening on the network, which is important. I suppose you could trunk. Some people have done that with vulnerability scanners too. They basically just trunk it and give it access to the VLANs, but that becomes a security issue, much like SNMP, right?
Do that.
Yes.
Don't do that. I don't like that idea.
Yeah, that would be bad.
Don't do that. This is such an easy diagnostic tool. You can pack it up on an old laptop that nobody's
Docker
using.
Container.
It's a tiny Docker container. You can put it on a flash drive that boots, some old laptop, and just make that a protocol. Generate those differentials. Give them to me and tell me that you added this to the network diagram and you put something new in there, or tell me that you don't know what it is and we need to send a team.
And that's the question: where should the data be sent, right? And what I like about doing this is, if you're running this scan in an environment, and then you're correlating that with your pen test results, with your vulnerability scanning results, right? Not just diffing it against itself, like we said, but diffing it with the other assessments that are going on, and you're like, hold on, wait, why does that vulnerability scan never see this device, but when I run my NMAP scan, it sees that device all the time, right? You could compare this with attack simulation runs. Be like, it never sees that vulnerable Windows server over there, but yet, like, when I went there and I ran this scan and I brought those results back in, the thing is, like, where do you put them? But, you may find differences. And so I was talking about this with Dan DeClaus from PlexTrack, and I'm like, Dan, like a great place to put this stuff. I'm like, I would send this stuff to my PlexTrack server all the time. And like whatever other assessment results are coming in, I would know maybe like if they missed something. And I'm like, Dan, do you import results from like the Vulner's NSE script? He's like, looks at his watch. He's like, when's our tech segment? I'm like, 2 weeks from now. He's like, more than enough time.
Yeah.
So next week we get to hear from Dan. And this was planned between Dan and I, but I was actually doing this tech segment before I talked to Dan, and he was like, yeah, dude, it's on. I'm totally going to like modify PlexTrack, write an importer for these vulnerability scan results, and Dan's going to show us how to do that next week.
And this very thing is the reason when you get from upper management and they're saying we can't afford this is why you can say, yes, we can. Come on.
Right.
You know, I mean,
exactly.
Because there are super expensive products out there that can do all this fancy stuff and blow it all into a network map and light it up with flashing red lights and things. But and I mean, and that's great. And the easier it is, the more likely you are to use it. But this is something that you can do that people have been doing since the 90s to generate maps and just sort of telemetry about your network that you ought to be doing. I mean, I really want to see people doing things like this because this is just one of those good self-check kind of things.
And what I love about this is it's completely free and open source.
Right.
So, and I showed like you can modify this stuff to suit your needs.
And it doesn't even take much time.
It didn't take me that much time to make the modifications I did.
And I mean,
and if you want the modifications I did, I'm going to share them out. So
so you can steal his.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is the way the internet was meant to be.
Absolutely. So questions, Lee?
Yeah. So I was thinking, once you've got this feel of what's on your network and some of the vulnerabilities, I'm thinking, particularly for the home users, do they know what's talking to what, and how could we get there? Because you mentioned VLANs for a minute, and you want to keep things from talking to the internet, but if you don't know what needs to talk.
It's a great point, Lee, especially when it comes to home. And there is a project that I'm working on. Tyler's working on a similar project for home. And I'm realizing the more I think about it, as the more time we spend at home, because we're not traveling, working from home, right? I'm like, there's a lot of different levels in what needs to talk to what. So there's like entertainment devices, right? Like my NVIDIA Shield. And I've got several of them. And my Xbox. I mean, those are primarily for entertainment. And I'm like, iPads, maybe not. Maybe I put those in entertainment because the way my kids use them is mostly for entertainment. But the Chromebooks that either I've bought for them or come from school, those are primarily used for educational purposes. So I need an education network. I need an entertainment network. And then I also need an IoT network because I've got thermostats and, all this other stuff. I'm like, and then I need an administrative network for myself, right? So my design now includes, I don't know about yours, Tyler, but I'm up to 4 VLANs that buying mostly refurbished and inexpensive Cisco SG series, small business series gear, which supports VLAN. I mean, it doesn't support a lot of other features the enterprise gear does, but it's enough for me. Like, I just basically need VLANs, and that's it. So I've replaced all of my switches. Well, not yet, but I have all the replacements. And so areas where I may have a small switch, they're all going to be connected together. They're all going to be trunked. And my access points support trunking. And so all 4 of these networks will be in existence. And Lee, bring up a great point. Does the entertainment network need to talk to the educational network? Probably not, right?
Probably not.
And Paul, in my case, the IoT network would also be considered entertainment.
Yes, in your case, Larry,
that is story altogether,
right? Yeah, exactly. And so what I want to avoid is if someone compromises an IoT device, I don't want it to compromise the other networks or vice versa. When my kids put a virus on the gaming PC, it's going to be limited as to what it can talk to.
It shouldn't cross that hairpinning. Yeah. That's a hairpinning point where you're crossing between VLANs back in. Mm-hmm. So unless you're routing between those VLANs, which in a home network you normally wouldn't.
Right.
And even in a enterprise network, if you set it up right, you normally, when you route between those VLANs, you would do it on a whitelisting basis. So you only allow things to go across those VLAN barriers that you know what they are, and you say, this server has to upload data to that server. Okay, fine. I'm going to put a whitelist rule between those two VLANs, because otherwise there's no point in using VLANs. If you just turn them wide open, it's just a stupid overhead thing.
But then you can also, if your firewall like pfSense also supports VLANing, or you have enough interfaces, then you can do QoS on that.
Oh, yeah.
Then you can set times to go, hey, you know what? Entertainment network is off, right? Past its time, or I'm just on my phone going, yep.
I still wouldn't let it go in between the VLANs.
No, I agree.
There's just no good reason to do that, because, like I say, if you do that, you don't need the segmentation. I mean, it's pointless at that point. So if you've got that going on, you should be whitelisting only, and then you should be able to generate a report at that choke point. So that choke point, if you are wanting to test what's talking to other things, what devices in this VLAN are talking to the outside world, you could go in there and log that or Wireshark it at that choke point and say, where did it go and when did it go? And then what you do is you go back to that VLAN and turn things on one at a time and see.
You know, even better, though, on the management VLAN, you talk to the switches and you say, hey, you know what? You write a script. Put me on this VLAN. Scan that VLAN, save the results, and then see if I can get to any of the other networks.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I'm talking about your devices that are phoning home and calling out that you're worried about.
Yeah.
You can as they come on is when they most likely are going to start trying to phone home.
Right.
So you can Wireshark or log at that choke point. So where all those VLANs come together to go out, because unless you have a lot of drops, you've got a choke point somewhere, whether it's a firewall or it's a router or something, and you can log right there and then just go in that one of those segments, and now we're talking about pretty small networks, turn everything off and turn one thing on and go, look at this thing. This doorbell just called China, and it's uploading a whole stream of stuff. And you could Wireshark that and capture all that data, and like PCAPs, and you could take all those packet logs and look at them and actually maybe see what it is, and if it's encrypted, get worried.
Tyler?
So the hard thing you end up running into with these home networks, and even like some small businesses, is as you break these networks out and you start doing the whitelist approach, some of the stuff isn't documented. Like there are use cases where, like say a doorbell, or say your security cameras. Maybe you have an RTSP stream, or you have an app on your phone. You end up having a mobile device that needs to connect to an IoT device, or you want to send, you want a Chromecast, or you want to tell Alexa to do something. These are interoperabilities between different VLANs that you set up, and you end up with problems for multicast and broadcast data and UDP mostly.
It assumes,
and these
Tyler,
are the big issues.
In the home, everything assumes that it's on the same flat network.
No, that's true.
Agreed.
Always.
Mm-hmm.
Which makes me want to segment it even more.
Yes, completely agree.
But Tyler's right. That can cause really weird problems for certain types of devices, especially multicasting or any of these kind of casting type devices that want to just they use UDP, they use all kinds of other protocols to communicate.
Like universal plugin.
Yeah, and so they're just sending other protocols out there, so they're really difficult to whitelist. But here's what I would tell you. If you know that there's something there, at least you know it's there.
Right. And
if you want to live with it and you want to assume that risk, go for it and assume the risk. And maybe the risk is nothing. I mean, it may just literally be a gadget that just is, it's a Soho device. It assumes it's a home. It's not doing anything nefarious. It's just talking and chattering. So maybe it's harmless.
I don't want to assume that risk, but my wife, on the other hand, she wants her device to work properly. How it shows on TV. Well,
you got to meet the user's needs first.
I mean, wives are demanding 4
or
9s.
Or lock that shit down and tell them tough.
Their SLA is like 5 9s, man. Like
I'm telling you,
shit goes wrong. Your phone's blowing up.
That phone is going to ring. I guarantee it.
Well, that will conclude this technical segment. I will be posting the slides and other such information online, so stay tuned to our Twitter stream and Discord channel. So with that, we'll take a short break, come back with Corey Thune from GravWell. Stay tuned.